Troublemakers podcast. My name is Monica. I'll be your host today. Today we are speaking to Sungu Oyoo, and we are back at the Mashujaa Heritage and Library. Sungu has been at the podcast before discussing decolonization, and today we'll be having a chat with him around how to shift the spectrum of allies. But before we continue, Sungu, welcome. Introduce yourself.
Thank you, Monica, and thank you for having me on the podcast again. Like Monica mentioned, my name is Sungu Oyoo. I'm a writer, an educator, an activist, and a Pan-Africanist. I am part of MWAMKO, the Pan-African Popular Pedagogy Collective, where I currently work as the Director of Special Programs and Organisational Development. And I'm also part of Kongamano Lamapinduzi, which is a political movement in Kenya. And I serve as its National Spokesperson here in Kenya.
Mm-hmm. Asante sana. As we dive into this, it's always interesting to try and explore how we can, politicize people, get people speaking about change and the struggle. So since you've been in these different movements, and I know you have been in the struggle for quite a while, please, let's learn from you how we can do this. How can we shift people from being neutrals or opposition to being allies in the struggle?
I think if we are to, I'm actually, as we speak, I'm looking at the pocket edition of Beautiful Trouble, a toolbox for revolution, the small one. And one of the principles which is really interesting and which Monica mentioned is shifting the spectrum of allies. And in this particular edition, it's a contribution by Joshua Kahn Russell. And I think one of the poignant things that Joshua says is that movement building hinges on seeing society as specific blocks or networks. And I think for me, that's the most important thing out of all of it, because a lot of times it's possible to see society as a monolith. Mm-hmm. That is why sometimes people speak of the public, that we are going out to the public. Mm-hmm. But who is the public? And how do you segment the different parts that comprise the public? Mm-hmm. And so I think that the spectrum of allies helps us conduct analysis that shifts, that helps us conduct analysis that enables us to see the different segments of society and come up with differentiated strategies on how to shift support from under the foot of our opponents.
Yeah, and you could also just tell us how you've done that. And you pointed out a good thing about the public or the society. We put them in this larger group, but that society is made up with people who understand the struggle, who agree with your ideology, who understand your ideology, people who have never heard about it, and people who probably are opposing the struggle that you're in. So it would be nice to also hear from your experience how this has been in practice, or how you've used this in practice in the different organizations and movements you've been part of.
I think what comes most easily to mind is the events of last year in Kenya, which culminated in June 25th, when the masses stormed the parliament. But I think to fully understand June 25th, we have to move back a few years ago. Mm-hmm. When I started organizing more than a decade ago, I was a member of Kenyans for Tax Justice when I just left the student movement. And we were advocating against the high cost of living and the attempt to institute new taxes or to legislate new taxes, especially value-added taxes on essential commodities like milk and bread. However, for the longest period of time, we only spoke to ourselves. And when that struggle against high cost of living took a qualitative leap, Unga Revolution was formed by members of Bunge la Mwananchi, which was a different social movement. Bunge la Mwananchi means the People's Parliament, a movement that's still active to date. And at Bunge, they came up with a radical campaign titled Unga Revolution. Unga is a Kenyan staple. It's maize flour. used to make ugali, which is a Kenyan staple, on almost every meal across, for most families at least. And when they started Unga Revolution, that's around 2010, 2012, 2013, around that period. They also did not really reach out to a large segment of the population outside of activist circles. And so what I can see from Kenyans for Tax Justice and Bunge la Mwananchi is that both of them were kind of preaching to the choir.
And that's interesting that you point that out, because there's always that thing of, as long as you agree with me, it's easier to have a conversation with you.
Yes.
And then we get that echo chamber. So we are all saying the same thing and never get out of that community that we've already built. But yeah, just continue and tell us how that has changed over time.
But I think since probably since around 2016, 2017 or thereabout, we start seeing members of the social justice movement. I'm not sure of the year, maybe it's even 2019. Members of the social justice movement having programs, actions, and campaigns around the high cost of living. And this one was named the Njaa Revolution. And Njaa Revolution doesn't necessarily reach out to many other groups, but it is now able to bring more activist groups together than previous attempts. It is now able to have more public actions, whether it's demonstrations, whether it's press conference. They had a variety of tactics at their disposal, which they deployed quite effectively. In 2024, however, like all years, in the month of June every year, before the Kenyan Parliament, the government presents what's called a finance bill. The finance bill lays out the taxes that, or the ways in which government will collect taxes over a financial year, and then these taxes finance the budget. And so the 2024 finance bill, Kenyans were already overtaxed, but the 2024 finance bill sought to levy, sought to increase taxes on a population that was already overtaxed. And so, for example, it was increasing taxes on basic commodities like maize flour, rice, milk, imposing VAT,
sanitary
towels, diapers, while at the same time exempting luxury goods like helicopter spare parts, exempting multinationals from a variety of taxes. And because the economy was already doing badly and it hadn't fully recovered from the COVID crisis, this was it was felt more by most people. And so on June 18th, if I remember clearly, June 18th of 2024, when the first protests began in Nairobi, there were very few people on the streets and the crowds were easily dispersed. And the clarion call of those protests was reject finance bill. Reject the finance bill. And however, the strategies that were then used after June 18th were able to mobilize a lot of people in a very short period of time. And so you find, because everyone in society or every segment in society has needs and has political interests. And in this organizing, there was both physical organizing and there was a lot of narrative work involved, whether it involved translating the finance bill to different languages or breaking it down into a language that could easily be understood, because we have to also understand that it's a parliamentary bill and it's quite technical in nature for most Kenyans to understand it. But the people with the skills broke it down and created videos that they shared on social media and other platforms, translated it to different languages, simplified it, made Kenyans understand how the implementation of this bill would make their already unpleasant lives actually more unpleasant, or would put them in a worse financial position. And what the effect of that was that there occurred what I would call a strategic escalation. And that strategic escalation was anchored on mass mobilization. So the initial call, which was reject finance bill, was countered by state propagandists who said, amend, don't reject. The masses insisted on reject finance bill.
Don't amend.
Yeah, reject, don't amend.
Yes.
And when the government refused to listen to them, they escalated it to Ruto must go.
Yes.
And it's because I think the government on its side made a strategic mistake, because the neo-colonial state in us is really not fashioned to work for the people, and it doesn't listen to the people. It has no ears. It has no capacity to listen. It tries to ram down its decisions down the throats of the people.
Force.
Of course, through the use of a lot of violence. The police are their conveyor belts of violence. They bring violence to the doorsteps of the masses. And so when the masses said Ruto must go, it was a very strategic escalation, because what had started as reject finance bill had now become Ruto must go. But when they said Ruto must go, they're also not speaking of Ruto the individual. They were speaking of Ruto and all the institutions which had enabled him to pass this bill. Because remember, the bill was passed by parliament, where parliamentarians had voted.
But they also listen to the head of the country, who is Ruto.
Who is Ruto, of course. He has basically neutered that institution, despite the principle of separation of powers. Parliament has, in many ways in Kenya, been reduced to a branch of the executive. But then this strategic escalation, what it was able to do when it came to Ruto must go, and the killing started on the streets, we first see when the protest started on June 18th, it was a small group of activists. We then see that because the message has been translated, we see the students joining the protests, because they can already see how this bill will affect the education. We see members of the middle class who do not usually attend protests starting to come to the protest. And then we see parents of young people who usually go to the protests starting to come to the protest.
Their kids are in the protest.
And I mean, they have a direct interest in the protest. Their kids are there. The lives of their kids are in danger. And at the same time, a lot of them do not agree with what the government through parliament is doing, but it's just that they've never thought of protest as their thing. And so when they saw their kids, they realized, oh no, these kids take this matter seriously than even us.
I think I'll take you back a bit, because I have seen the strategic escalation since June 2024. But then I've also been listening to you talk about, the conversation around budgets specifically, starting with the tax justice campaign, where you had the Unga revolution, and then the social justice centers come in with the Nja revolution. And these all are speaking to like the cost of living, which is linked to the financial budget every year. And then last year, of course, we had the reject finance bill. Do you feel like this was an intentional escalation, or was it like quote unquote accidental, just that it happened, that we moved from Unga revolution to Nja revolution to reject the finance bill?
I think it's both, specifically because history is not linear. And so over the years, a lot of things had been tried. They failed. They were tried again. They failed. They were iterated, modified, and tried. Maybe there was a little improvement. And so I think the organizing was also getting better. And the activists could see who was with them on the street, who was not with them on the street. And in the last few years particularly, there was, in a more intentional way, there was more reaching out to diverse groups. And so, like during the protests, I remember at the beginning, activists reached out to most of the unions. Only a few joined the process or supported the process, which was still a win, because the unions had not been working hand in hand with the movement. So like the doctors' union and whatnot.
It was just silos of different
The churches, most of them were actually very pro-regime at the beginning of the protest. By the end of the protest, some of them had been shifted. Not all of them. Some of them are still actually.
But there was a good number of them that were shifted.
A good number of them, Though there is that small portion that remains part of in the active opponent camp. And so, but for me, the thing is, even apart from these groups, it's to, I look at the spectrum of allies as something that has a domino effect. Once you are able to shift one segment, you create a vacuum that was previously occupied by that segment. And nature abhors a vacuum, which then means that something has to fill that segment. For example, if I'm able to make my passive allies become active allies, then it is very likely that those who are in the neutral side are easier to convince to become passive allies, and then over time turned into active allies. So this domino effect for me is, once you're able to create the first significant shift, it becomes easier to move the other blocks.
I'm also, because I was also reading that principle of shifting the spectrum of allies, and there was a point about how sometimes we focus on the like active opponents, put a lot of effort on who is against us, and not necessarily who is easier to shift to our side. From your experience, how do we navigate that? Because it's easier, even in organizing with this, sometimes we're very good to say what we don't want, and we forget there's an in-between of easier targets or milestones that we could win before we get to the active or opposition that is there. How can we navigate this? How can we think around this when we're trying to shift our allies?
I think trying to trying to convince your active opponent to come to your side, it's almost like trying to convince the owner of a butchery to become vegetarian. It is almost impossible. Might be possible, but it is so much work. It is so much work.
You have to believe in a bigger being in the universe to ally.
For me, I would think of us starting with the blocks that are easiest to shift. The thing with the active opponents is, the more we try to convince them, is the more they also develop a siege mentality. And become more entrenched in their position and grow even deeper roots. So for me, the thing is to just wither and chip at their support base until they're isolated, until they basically crumble naturally.
Have we mapped these blocks? Because we know our opposition. I feel like the active opponents are very clear to all of us. But have we mapped out these blocks in between, the passive allies, the neutrals? Have we been able to map that out?
I think different groups and different struggles have been able to map them out, because they also differ from struggle to struggle and from context to context, such that, for example, the active opponents, for example, in the broader feminist struggle, might not be the active opponents in a struggle against sand harvesting in the river next to my house, or police brutality. And so I think from struggle to struggle, it matters. And so I think for me, it's important that each movement is able to do its own mapping of around the spectrum, to identify who its allies are, who its opponents are, who its neutrals are. And it's even possible to get into a coalition with other movements and discover that someone who is neutral, for example, to the movement I belong to, Kongamano Lamapinduzi, is an ally of this other organization and an opponent of that other organization. So sometimes when we come together, we realize that we all our different organizations, our different movements view the same segment within the population differently. And I think that arises out of our analysis and how the tools we use to conduct our analysis, how we relate to them, and what we think that their needs and political interests are.
Oh, that's like, I'm thinking of that, and also realization in my head that we also care about different issues differently. So like feminist movements will have allies who really care about the feminist agenda, and they might not be as invested in water, or like access to water, climate as much. And so that means when they are meeting two different organizations that are working on different agendas, they might fall on different parts of the spectrum of allies. But we have learned a lot from you today, but I'm wondering, for the sustainability of this uprising that happened in 2024, what could we do to keep those allies that we have shifted or who have now been politicized a bit and care about the issues of, affordable livelihoods, also, being interested in how the finance bill works and the different, arms of government and how they work, the parliament. Right now, people are talking of corruption. How can we maintain that momentum and also keep these allies that are now interested, are now paying attention, involved as we move forward?
I do not think there is a specific response to that, but I've always thought that one of the best ways to keep momentum and to keep organizing processes going on is to constantly keep people engaged.
Yeah.
Because once people are not engaged, they find something else to do,
Yeah.
and shift their attention and time there. And so it's for the movements to figure out how to continue putting pressure on especially the legislative arm of government, parliament, because the finance bill is read annually, to continuously conduct political education around the finance bill, to continuously do campaigns against the cost of living, and ultimately for the movements to go back to the people. Because it is also possible for the movements to, after getting minor concessions from the state, for example, the way the Kenyan state dropped the finance bill last year, for the movements to slacken and retreat back into their echo chambers where everyone is preaching to the choir and they're already converted. It is important that we go back to the masses, because it is the people who are the motive force of history. It is the people who create history. And like Amilcar Cabral reminds us, Amilcar Cabral was interviewed by I think it's a journalist, I'm not sure. And he was asked when they started the guerrilla struggle in Guinea. He was one of the leaders of the PAIGC, the liberation movement in Guinea and Cape Verde. He was asked, so Cabral, you're launching a guerrilla struggle, but there are no mountains in Guinea. And he told the journalist, the people are our mountains. And so our struggle must remain anchored on the people. I think that for me is the only way to maintain momentum.
Yeah. And good point that we need to make sure we do not forget, keep the attention before all the people we've mobilized over time, get other things to look at and work on. But as we come to a close of this podcast, would you have a parting shot for people who are organizing in different countries, trying to build their numbers, shift alliances so that they have more allies than opposers? Any parting shot from the experience, Sungu Oyoo?
I think the greatest experience I've learned from a decade of organizing is that there is no mathematical formula to organize. There is no set way of organizing. We must do a comprehensive analysis of the situation, a concrete analysis of the concrete conditions, and based on that, come up with a comprehensive strategy which can move our struggle forward. And so for me, the only thing I can say is that never give up until you win, no matter how long it takes. Lastly, like I mentioned earlier, I'm a writer. In 2024, August of 2024, actually one year ago exactly, on 3rd of August 2024, Comrades Book House published my first collection of poetry. It's titled Abolish Everything, a poetic manifesto from last evening.
Could you read one of the poems for us?
Okay, niwasome gani? Abolish Everything.
Yes, I like that.
Okay, I like it because it's short. Like I said, last year, on the 3rd of August 2024, Comrades Book House published my first collection of poetry. It's titled Abolish Everything, a poetic manifesto from last evening. And the title comes from one of the poems in the book, which I will read out to you. And this is how it goes. Abolish hunger. Abolish student loans. Abolish the curriculum. Abolish water bills. abolish the thieving cellular companies, abolish everything. Or better yet, abolish injustice, abolish the police, abolish the system and its prisons, abolish everything. Dismantle patriarchy, dismantle capitalism, dismantle imperialism, dismantle the system and its prisons, dismantle everything. But abolition is creation. To destroy hate is to create love. To dismantle impunity is to create justice. To abolish war is to create peace. To unlearn individualism is to create community. To tear down the old order is to build the new. Hasten decolonization, nurture organization, create dignity, create equality, and whilst creating Utu, abolish everything. The book is available at a bookstore near you, mostly across Africa, from Nairobi to Johannesburg to Cape Town, across bookshops and a few bookshops in Europe. And so, but in case you need to reach out, you can drop us a message, either on my personal social media, which is Sungu Oyoo, or across all platforms, or you can reach out to MWAMKO Africa, the organization that I am part of, and then we can figure out how to get you a copy.
Asante sana. Abolish everything.
Abolish.
But good chatting with you. It's always a good time learning from you, hearing from you, and your wealth of experience. And we hope we can catch up on another episode soon.
Thank you. And I also really enjoyed the podcast, and I've learned a lot this afternoon. Asante.
Hi! We hope you enjoyed the conversation on this episode of Troublemakers and feel inspired to stir up some good trouble in your own community. Do feel free to check out our other episodes and subscribe to Troublemakers podcast in your preferred podcast app. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook as troublemakers.podcast for all the latest updates, behind-the-scenes content, and sneak peeks of what's coming next. We also love to hear from our listeners. You can email us via troublemakersthepodcast@gmail.com or simply drop a DM through our social media. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, take a moment and share it with a friend or leave us a review. It really helps us grow our community of troublemakers. Keep shaking things up.